Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Thank you very much for joining us today. We wanted to continue with the 9th canto. So I'd like to seek your good wishes, your blessings, so that we can look at chapter 11 and hopefully 12 and 13 as well. So this is a verse from chapter 11.
Tam Yasharagupate Suro Vichanyata Lilatano Adhika Samya Vimukta Damana Rakshovada Jaladi Pandandan Padanman Astrapugo Kim Tasya Shatru Hanane Kapaye Sahaya.
Good.
Lord Ramchandra's reputation for having killed Ravan with showers of arrows at the request of demigods and for having built a bridge over the ocean does not constitute the factual glory of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Ramachandra, whose spiritual body is always engaged in various pastimes. Lord Ramchandra has no equal or superior, therefore he has no need to take help from the monkeys to gain victory over Ravan.
So his activities here, they are not the real glory of the Lord. He's glorious no matter what. So this chapter, we talked last chapter, 10th chapter of the pastimes of Lord Ram, up to him becoming king again of Dwaka. So, king of Dwaka. Now this chapter talks about him ruling the world, describes how he resides in Ayodhya with his younger brothers, performs various sacrifices. Lord Ramachandra, Supreme Personality of Godhead, accepted an acharya and performed various sacrifices by which to worship himself. And at the end of these sacrifices, he gave land to the Hota, the person who performs the sacrifices, Advaryu, Udgata, and the Brahman priests. He gave them the eastern, western, northern, and southern directions respectively. And the balance he gave to the Acharya. I presume that is Vashisht, right? Considering that the Brahmanas, who have no material desires, should possess the entire world. So this is the underlying principle of Lord Ramachandra's rule. Both Lord Ramachandra and Sita Devi retained only the garments they wore. Their faith in the Brahmins and affection for his servants was observed by all the Brahmins, who then offered their prayers to the Lord and returned whatever they had taken from him. They regarded the enlightenment given to them by the Lord within the core of their hearts as a sufficient contribution. So performing yagya involves worshipping the Lord. Sacrifices were not different from the Lord. Since he is the process, he is the result of sacrifice. Here the Lord worshipped the Lord himself. So he's doing this sacrifice, worshipping himself. A little bit like Krishna when he meditates upon himself every morning as a grihastha in Dwaka. And similarly, Ram performed yagyas to satisfy himself. But an ordinary soul shouldn't imitate the Supreme Lord by worshipping himself. That's exclusively the Lord's right. And Kshatriya's duty is to give charity. This is what Lord Ram did. And the Brahman's duty is to accept it, but not more than needed to maintain body and soul. That's why they gave it all back to Lord Ram. Lord Ram subsequently dressed himself like an ordinary person, and began wandering within the capital to understand what impression the citizens had of him. By chance, one night he heard a man talking to his wife. His wife had gone to another man's house. In the course of rebuking his wife, the man spoke suspiciously of the character of Sita Devi. The Lord immediately returned home, and fearing such rumors, he superficially decided to give up Sita Devi's company. Thus, he sent Sita Devi, who was pregnant, to the shelter of Valmiki Muni, where she gave birth to twin sons, Love and Kush. So this is something that's been debated for long periods of time, why he would do that. And we've covered this many, many times before. The descendants of Ramachandra's brothers. Lakshman, he begot two sons, Angad and Chitraketu. Bharat, he also begot two sons, Taksha and Pushkala. Shatrughna also, same, two children, Subhahu and Shrutasena. And when Bharat went to conquer various lands on behalf of the emperor, Lord Ramachandra, he fought many millions of Gandharvas. By killing them in the fight, he acquired immense wealth, which he brought home. Shatrughna killed a demon named Lavana at Madhuvan and thus established the capital of Mathura. So this was the business of Shatrughna. He established Mathura near Vrindavan. Meanwhile, Sita Devi placed her two sons in the care of Valmiki Muni, and then meditating upon the lotus feet of Lord Ramachandra, she entered into the earth. Upon hearing of this, Lord Ramachandra was very much aggrieved, and thus he performed sacrifices for 13,000 years. Thereafter, he entered his own abode, the Vaikuntha planet, beyond the Brahmajyoti, followed by Ayodhya Vasis, who served him in various ways. So they also had the option of going with Lord Ram. Lord Ramachandra's reputation for having killed Ravan with showers of arrow at the request of the demigods and for building a bridge over the ocean does not constitute the factual glory of Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Ramachandra, whose spiritual body is always engaged in various pastimes. Lord Ramachandra has no equal or superior, and therefore he has no need to take help from the monkeys to gain victory over Ravan. But he still does so in order to glorify the devotion of the monkeys, give them an opportunity to serve. In reply to Parikshit Maharaj's question about the relationship of Ram with his brothers and the residents of Ayodhya, Sukadeva Goswami ends this chapter by describing how the Lord ordered his brothers to conquer the world, whilst he remained in Ayodhya to give darshan to the citizens and run the state affairs. The results of hearing about the activities of Lord Ram and by describing how the Lord protects his citizens and displays affection for his brothers. So,
It's supposed to be the results. I just have the results.
oh yeah, so that's right. Sukadeva is also describing what happens when you talk about Lord Ramachandra and how he protects his citizens. Yeah, thank you. So that's chapter 11. Any questions, any comments? Okay, let's go to chapter 12.
Shri Sukuvacha Kushasya Chatitis Tasman Nishadastat Suto Nabaha Undari Kotha Tat Putra Shemata Tanava Bhavatataha. Sukadeva Goswami said, the son of Ramachandra was Kush, the son of Kush was Atiti, the son of Atiti was Nishad, and the son of Nishad was Nabha. The son of Nabha was Pundarik, and from Pundarik came a son named Srimad Danava.
Good. So now we're going to talk about the lineage. This chapter is all about the dynasty of Kusha. And the members of this dynasty are descendants of Shashada and the son of Maharaj Ikshvaku. So dynasty of Kusha. Following in the genealogical table of Lord Ramachandra's dynasty, Kush, the Lord's son was followed consecutively by the following. So there's a whole lot of names now. Atiti, Nishada, Nabha, Pundarik, Vrajavnab, Bala, Stala.
Goes this way.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, thank you. Shema, Dhanva. You want to read the names?
Mm-hmm.
Go on.
Devanika Aniha Pariyatra Valashtala Vajranab Sagana Vidriti Hiranyanaba Pushpa Truvasandi Sudarshan Agnivarna Shigara Maru Prashruta Sandhi Amarshana Mahaswan Vishwabahu Prashenjit Takshaka and Brihabdabala.
So we know a little bit about some of them. Vajnab was said to have been born from the effulgence of the sun god. From Hiranyanaba, the great saint Yajnavalkya learned the highly elevated system of mystic yoga known as Adhyatma Yoga, which can loosen the knots of material attachment in the heart. Having achieved perfection in the power of mystic yoga, Maru still lives in a place known as Kalapa Grama. At the end of Kali Yuga, he will revive the lost Surya dynasty by begetting a son. And Brihad Bala, he was killed in a fight by your father. So Sukadev Goswami is explaining to Parikshit Maharaj. This is how Arjun, is it Arjun? No, it would be the other guy, Abhimanyu, yeah, killed him. Okay, future kings of the Surya dynasty, are you ready? All of them will become kings, one after the other. Sumitra, coming in this age of Kali, will be the last king in the Ikshwaku dynasty. After him, the dynasty will be extinguished. Okay. Ta-da.
Me to read them.
Go on.
Okay. Brihadbala, Brihadrana, Urukriya, Vatsavridha, Prativyoma, Bhanu, Divaka, Sahadev, Brihadwasra, Bhanuman, Pratikshwa, Supratika, Marudeva, Sunakshatra, Pushkara, Antariksha, Sutapa, Amitrajit, Brihadraja, Barhi, Gitanjaya, Rananjaya, Sanjaya, Sakya, Sudodha, Langala, Prasanjit, Shudraka, Ranaka, Shrutha, Sumitra.
Well done. Well done. Very good. Okay, that's the end of the chapter. Any questions? Okay, chapter 13. Go for it. You're a roll.
Shya yoga na vanchanti yoga paya kataraha vajanti charanam pojam unaya hari medashaha. Maharaj Nimi continued, Mayavadis generally want freedom from accepting a material body because they fear having to give it up again. But devotees whose intelligence is always filled with the service of the Lord are unafraid. Indeed, they take advantage of the body to render transcendental loving service.
Mm-hmm. Very, very nice philosophy here. The devotees of the Lord, they want to always engage in the service of the Lord, never want to do anything just for themselves. They don't fear even having a material body because they engage in the service of the Lord. And this is very powerful. So the dynasty of Maharaj Nimi, chapter 13. This chapter describes the dynasty in which Janak was born. Janak Raj, Sita Devi's father. This is the dynasty of Maharaj Nimi, who is the son of Ikshwaku. Now, he was cursed by Vashishta. This is the pastime. When Maharaj Nimi began performing great sacrifices, he wanted to appoint Vashishta as the chief priest. But Vashishta, he had another job already, for he had already agreed to be the priest in performing a yajna for Lord Indra. So then Vashishta said, can you just wait until I finish my daytime job with Indra, and then I'll come and do your job. But Maharaj Nimi, he did not wait because he considered that this life is very flickering. He thought life is very short, so there is no need to wait. It can end at any moment. He therefore appointed another priest to perform the yajna. Upon returning from the completion of Indra's yajna, Vashishta was very angry at King Nimi because King Nimi had appointed another priest to perform the yajna. And he unnecessarily cursed him, saying, may your body fall down. This is quite heavy. No fault of Maharaj Nimi. He himself took another job. And yet he was cursing Maharaj Nimi. Anyway, cursed in that way, Maharaj Nimi also became angry because for the sake of more lucrative remuneration from the king of heaven, Vashisht neglected Nimi, whom he had now unnecessarily cursed. Nimi retaliated by saying, "May your body also fall down." As a result of this cursing and counter-cursing, both of them gave up their bodies. And after this incident, Vashisht took birth again, begotten by Mitra and Varun, who were agitated by Urvashi. Yes, Riyanj.
Prabhuji, the first part, it was same like King Nimi Janaka story. Janaka was born from Nimi's house. The first part, all. But the full story is not like that.
Yes. Okay. Very interesting. Maharaj Nimi requests to the demigods, the priests who were engaged in the sacrifice for King Nimi, because they were a little upset. What the heck's going on here? We're doing the sacrifice and suddenly there's this cursing and counter-cursing. They preserved the Nimi's body in fragrant chemicals. And when the sacrifice was over, the priests prayed for Nimi's life to all the demigods who had come to the arena of the yagya. But Maharaj Nimi said, I don't want another body in this material body, because he considered this material body obnoxious and imprisonment. So the devatas, they had two requests, one from the priest to give him a body, and from Maharaj Nimi, don't give me a body. So what to do? So they agreed to meet both requests and spoke as follows. Let Maharaj Nimi live without a material body. Let him live in a spiritual body as a personal associate of the Supreme Lord. Let him manifest and unmanifest to the common people as he wishes. This is really spectacular stuff. Although Nimi did not want a material body, it is impossible to worship the Lord without a body. You need something. So he asked for a spiritual body. This was granted. The ability to see Krishna depends on Krishna's mercy. The same privilege of being seen or unseen according to one's own desire given to Nimi is also dependent on Krishna's mercy. Thus, he lived in his original spiritual body as an associate of the Lord. So the sages, then they kept the body of Nimi and they churned it. And as a result of this churning, a son was born. So this is very similar to a previous pastime. Anybody remember? Whose body was churned in order for Prithu to appear?
Prithu Maharaj.
Yeah, but whose body was churned? King
Vena.
Yeah, King Vena. Yeah, well done, well done. And because he was born in an unusual way, he was called Janak. Because this who this son was born, he had three names. He was born from the dead body of his father. He was called Vaideha, without a body. He was born from the churning of his father's body. He was known as Mithila. Interesting, huh? And these are the descendants of Mithila. So this is the son of Maharaj Nimi. Okay, ready?
Okay. So Mithila, Udaswashu, Nandivardhana, Suketu, Devarat, Brihadrata, Mahavirya, Shudriti, Vishraketu, Haryashva, Maru, Patipaka, Kritaratha, Devamidha, Vishruta, Mahadriti, Kritaratha, Maharoma, Swarnaroma, Harshvaroma, Shadaj, and that's Janak, Kushadwaj, Dharamdwaj, Kirtadwaj, Keshidwaj, Panuman, Satudumya, Suchi, Sanadwaj, Urjaketu, Ajah, Purujit, Ashtrivanemi, Shrutayu, Supashwaka, Chitrarat, Shemadi, Samartha, Satyarat, Upaguru, Upagupta, Vashavanant, Yudha, Subhashana, Shruta, Jaya, Vijaya, Vitah, Sunaka, Vitahaya, Triti, Bahalushva, Kriti, Mahavashi.
You have earned your dinner. God, you can see Sukadeva Goswami has got this amazing memory to remember all these kings in this dynasty. And that is not the end of the chapter. Okay. When Siradwaja Janakaraj was plowing a field, from the front of his plow, Sira, appeared a daughter named Sita Devi, who later became the wife of Lord Ramachandra. Thus, he became known as Shiradwaja. Shukadeva Goswami concludes by telling Parikshit Maharaj that all the kings of the dynasty of Mithila were completely in knowledge of their spiritual identity. Therefore, even though staying at home, they were liberated from the duality of material existence. So that's chapter 13 Ki Jai, Srimad Bhagavatam. Any questions, any comments? Okay, Madhusudan Babu, would you like to take us through the instructions?
Jai Hare Krishna. Yeah, Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai, Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Guru Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai. So I'll just read from what I sent you. So chapter 11 gets interesting after these chapters as well, but Shri Prabhupada explains in the purport that, one becomes envious because of being influenced by the designations of the body. For the liberated devotees, having nothing to do with the body and therefore is completely on the transcendental platform. A devotee is never envious of anyone, even his enemy. Because a devotee knows that the Lord is his supreme protector, he thinks, what harm can the so-called enemy do? So that shows, that the devotees are not really afraid of anything, because they depend totally on, like Prahlad Maharaj, he totally depended on the Supreme Lord. And he just didn't have any fear at all. What harm could Hiranyakashipu do? What harm could anybody else do? But then, and so a devotee who constantly engages in hearing and chanting, Shravanam Kirtanam, is certainly freed from the disease of envy, and thus he becomes eligible to go back home, back to God. So envy is one of those things that is very, very hard to overcome, or is always a tinge of envy in all of us, so unless we keep hearing and doing Shravanam, Kirtanam, Krishna, we surrender to Krishna, then we see that, we've got nobody to be envious of these different designations. So that's one way of getting away from envious nature of us. So chapter 12, so at least 5,000 years ago, Sri Sukadeva Goswami ascertained the existence of Maru in Kalapagram and said that Maru, having achieved a yoga siddha body, would continue to exist until the end of Kali Yuga, which is calculated to continue for 432,000 years. Such is the perfection of mystic yoga. So Prabhupada explains that sometimes we hear about these different personalities, or some of them are still in Badrinath, or they're in the mountains, or yoga and Siddhi and Ashwatthama and these different, but this shows that even Maru exists, and will exist till the end of Kali Yuga. Then he will start the next dynasty through into the Satyuga that comes next after Kali Yuga. So Srila Prabhupada confirms here is a factual example of perfection. A yoga siddha can live as long as he likes. So this is how they can control, they live as long as they want to. So, but that's material within the material universe, and the spiritual, devotional service leads you to beyond this sort of existence. But there's still these yogis and these are still serving the Supreme Lord by having to start another dynasty after this Kali Yuga. So chapter 13, then, Srila Prabhupada explains the powers of demigods in, I think I might have made a mistake there, with Maharaj Nimi. So in connection, I was meant to write, in connection with Maharaj Nimi. So we heard about Maharaj Nimi, how he didn't want the body, and how they preserved his body, a bit like the pharaohs and Egyptians used to do, I think, how they used to preserve the body, whether that comes from that sort of understanding or what, I don't know. But one should not think that the demigods are powerful only in engaging or enjoying the senses. They are also powerful in such deeds as bringing life back to a dead body. There are many similar instances of the Vedic literature. For example, according to the history of Savitri and Satyavan, Satyavan died and was being taken away by Yamaraj, but on the request of his wife, Savitri, Satyavan was revived in the same body. This is an important fact about the powers of the demigods. So they're much more powerful than we may think, but it's only on the sanction of the Supreme Lord that they would do certain things like that. So, okay, Haribol, Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anybody, any comments, any questions? Otherwise, we can go to the Nishinga Kavach. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.